In 2006, Abercrombie and Fitch's CEO gave an interview that someone, somewhere, should have stopped. We go after the cool kids. A lot of people don't belong in our clothes, and they can't belong. Are we exclusionary? Absolutely. He wasn't describing a mistake, he was describing the strategy. I'm Maya, and this is IADS Retail Park. This week, I wrote the IADS exclusive on Abercrombie and Fitch, the discrimination lawsuits, the Supreme Court defeat, the near collapse, and what the company had to dismantle to survive it. With me is Christopher Nee, IADS Honorary Advisor, who asked back in 2020 whether corporate diversity commitments were real or just the latest round of race washing. 6 years later, the A&F case gives us something to test that question against. Christopher, it's good to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Maya. It's nice to be back. Now, it's been 6 years since that piece. Reading yours, what strikes me most is how long everything took. A $40 million settlement in 2004, court-mandated reforms, a new diversity VP, and the company kept doing what it was doing. Can you start there?
Yes, of course. So, the Jeffries quote is essentially the philosophy. The look policy is what it looked like operationally. Store managers were formally instructed to hire for what the company called the look, overwhelmingly white, thin, conventionally attractive. Minority employees who did get hired were routinely moved to stockrooms away from customers. And it was written down. The look policy explicitly banned dreadlocks, religious head coverings, styles disproportionately associated with non-white identities. This wasn't bias that crept in. It was built in.
And this is precisely what gave the Gonzalez case its weight. Black, Latino, and Asian American plaintiffs all alleging they'd been kept off the sales floor for how they looked. Settlement, consent decree, 25 new recruiters specifically tasked with hiring minority employees. And then nothing actually changed?
For 7 years, the changes were real on paper and conditional in practice. Todd Corley, who became the diversity VP, did shift the workforce from about 90% white to closer to 50% white over 8 years, but he later described working against the current. When court monitoring ended in 2011, A&F reverted quickly. Marketing went back to being almost entirely white. Jeffries was still making the same public remarks. The consent decree enforced compliance. It never touched the culture at the top.
That's the pattern I also saw in 2020. Companies issuing statements while their exec teams hadn't changed at all. A decade-long version of the same thing, performance of DEI, not practice of it.
And the forcing function wasn't conscience. It was the business collapsing. By the mid-2010s, A&F was losing money and closing stores. The generation they'd built everything around had grown up and found the whole thing embarrassing. Exclusion stopped being aspirational. Jeffries was pushed out in late 2014. At that point, survival was the only agenda.
So not a moral awakening, more like market correction.
That's right, Christopher. Market correction, accumulated legal liability, and a share price that had lost most of its value. Fran Horowitz became CEO in 2017 and did what Jeffries had refused to do for 2 decades. She dropped the identity that was supposed to be the company's core asset. The hypersexualized, whitewashed campaigns went. The company extended sizing to bodies it had been rejecting. The Curve Love line developed what they described as a cult following among customers the brand had previously turned away. By 2021 to 2022, sales had stabilized and the share price had come back. On TikTok, the hashtag #AbercrombieIsBack trended.
It's a striking reversal, no doubt about that, Maya. But your exclusive itself raises the harder question. Horowitz joined A&F in 2004, the year of the settlement. She was inside the company for 13 years before becoming CEO. Has the internal culture actually changed? Or has it adapted to what the market now rewards?
That's the question the exclusive can't fully answer. What it documents is the external signals, the campaigns, the sizing, the hiring reforms. What we can't see clearly from the outside is whether the systems that enabled the discrimination, how performance gets evaluated, who gets promoted, what counts as a good cultural fit internally, have actually been rebuilt. That's where the white paper comes in. Across more than a dozen retailers, the pattern is consistent. DEI progress stalls or reverses when leadership changes or when external pressure eases. ANF demonstrated that between 2004 and 2011, there's no structural reason to assume it can't happen again.
I completely understand, Maya, which is exactly the risk in this moment. The US rollback of DEI programs post January 2025, the political pressure on corporate diversity commitments, it creates the same conditions. External oversight lifts, and companies that never embedded inclusion into actual operating systems fall back on old defaults. What's the counter argument that cuts through the noise?
Two things. One is the data. It hasn't moved. McKinsey, BCG, Accenture all still show that inclusive leadership teams outperform, that diverse retail workforces serve customers more effectively, that 41% of shoppers have switched retailers because they felt a brand didn't prioritize inclusion. These aren't aspirational numbers, they're market measurements. The second is what ANF's own history shows. The cost of exclusion isn't just reputational, it's competitive. ANF spent years ceding an entire customer segment, plus-size women, to competitors. Recapturing that market share takes longer than losing it.
The workforce side compounds that. Retail is one of the most diverse workforces globally. If you're managing teams that don't feel valued or seen, you're managing teams with higher turnover, lower engagement, and less willingness to surface the kind of customer feedback that actually improves operations. Turnover in retail isn't just an HR cost, it's a service quality cost.
The retailers in the white paper who embedded inclusion into everyday management, not just campaigns or hiring cycles, but how meetings run, how promotions work, how feedback moves from the shop floor upwards, those are the ones where the impact compounded over time. It stopped being a program and became how the organization operated. That's the distinction between Abercrombie 2004 and Abercrombie 2017. One was compliance under court order. The other was a business model rebuilt around a different premise.
You also examined the global dimension in the white paper. In my 2020 piece was largely US and UK focused. For retailers operating across regions where DEI carries different weight and different language, what's the practical challenge?
Inclusion isn't one concept globally. In some markets, gender equity dominates. In others, the priorities are ethnicity, disability, religious identity, or national integration. What works in one region can land badly in another. But the underlying requirements, specific goals, consistent application, managers held accountable for both, those hold across geographies. What doesn't work anywhere is treating DEI as culturally relative in ways that effectively excuse inaction. The form has to adapt, Christopher, but the commitment doesn't.
And the ANF consent decree had the right language. It literally included a line from the civil rights attorneys noting, Abercrombie now realizes diversity makes good business sense. They had it in writing in 2004, and it took another decade to act on it. That's the cautionary detail, isn't it?
That line stays with me. They wrote it down back in 2004, then spent the next 10 years not believing it, and another Supreme Court defeat and a near collapse before anything structurally shifted. For retailers making decisions now, especially under pressure to pull back from DEI, that's the case study. Not, will we face lawsuits, but are our commitments built into how we actually operate, or are they contingent on how much external scrutiny we're under? ANF answered that question in 2011. It nearly cost them the company.
6 years on from asking whether retail was listening to its customers, is it?
Unevenly. The retailers who asked seriously in 2020 and kept asking when it stopped being in the headlines are in better shape than those who treated it as a moment to manage. But the honest answer is that the industry still moves primarily when the market forces it. The ANF case is useful precisely because it makes that visible, in public over a decade with a documented paper trail.
Thanks for walking through this, Maya. It was a necessary conversation.
Thanks for being part of it. If one thing stays with you from this episode, make it that line from the 2004 consent decree. Abercrombie now realizes diversity makes good business sense. They had it in writing. It took another decade and a near collapse to act on it. The full case study is in this week's IADS exclusive, From Exclusive to Inclusive, Lessons from Abercrombie and Fitch's DEI Journey. It's on our Substack. Link is available in the episode description. For more from the world's leading department stores, follow us on LinkedIn at International Association of Department Stores and visit our website. Until next time, don't let your retail strategy go the way of the dinosaurs. This podcast uses AI cloned voices created with human oversight.